go around and introduce ourselves, because we have a broad range of development here in terms of children, so it'd be kind of fun to talk about, this topic from a different perspective. And so introduce yourself and tell us who your child is. Ivy, we'll start with.
Okay, my name is Ivy. My son is Aiden. He's about gonna turn 4 in January, and he's in primary this year. He was in the toddler program last time.
And Ivy is taking her primary training from Cambridge Montessori Institute, where I'm a faculty member. So we have that relationship as opposed to the one we've been having all these years. So it's been fun.
My name is Amber, and my son is Brady, and he's 6th year. It's also our first year here.
Oh,
First
great.
exposure to Montessori. He's elementary.
And he's a 6th year?
6th year.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
I am Esther. My daughter is Brianna. She's a primary. She was in class.
Uh-huh.
Because they met in toddler.
Right, they were toddlers together. Yeah.
My name's Lewis. Allie's in primary as well. She's 3, and then we've got a 6-month-old at home who is not here. Yeah.
But we can't wait.
Well, we're moving.
Yeah.
Just got out.
Oh.
Yeah. So, but
All right.
I'm Jill, and my daughter is Maddie. She's a 7th year.
A real big one.
Yeah, and we've been here since she was in 1st grade.
Yeah.
And I've never made it to any of your Montessori meetings, so I thought maybe
Glad
this
you're
one
here.
kind of pertained to the older kids a little bit.
Great.
Sure.
I'm Daphne, good morning, and I have Annabelle, who's a 6th year. We've been here since she was a 1st grader. And we have Emmeline in lower house, she's a 3rd year. And we have Benjamin Benny, who's in primary 2.
Well, welcome. So we're going to sort of talk about how we can help build confidence through the language that we use. And I see this as really a lifelong process. You guys were sort of referencing a lot of this morning. When I first started teaching, the phrase that made me the craziest, it was like fingernails on a blackboard, was the phrase "good job" or "good work." And I hear that everywhere. I hear it from parents, I hear it from teachers, it's just the way that we sort of wind up giving feedback, but the person who hears that phrase gets nothing about what their efforts mean. So what I want to talk about with you all today is how we can use language to help build confidence in children, because ultimately that's one of our goals here, so that children become competent, they become confident, they have skills that are necessary to help them negotiate their place in their community, whether it's a toddler community, whether it's a primary community, or elementary, and an adult community. So what I'd kind of like to do today is chat with you about some of the situations that occur in your homes, in your situations, and then how we can probably think about rephrasing them so that they become more words of encouragement and help the child to discover for themselves what he or she is doing that's positive. So I'll start off with a couple of examples. One of the things that might be happening in the primary classroom is children work independently. They take something out, they complete a task, they put it back on the shelves. And if this was a more traditional early childhood program, we might hear a teacher walk by and say, "Great job there, Benjamin. Good job, Sarah." What you hear here is more, "You finished that task. You put all the parts back," or "That looks like you really worked a long time on that task." So the purpose of the words that we want to give the children are really concrete acknowledgments of the efforts involved in that task. So it tends to be very specific as opposed to just this general phrase. And in doing that, we get to see what we're doing right. Oh, I can manage my time. Oh, I can complete a task. Oh, I did remember all the details. Oh, I did succeed more efficiently with this task. You know, with the older children, a lot of times they work in small groups or perhaps more independently. So in that case, we want to comment on what the group did together, if that's possible, if it's a group activity. This team worked so hard on this, and here's your project. Here's how you finished it. Or the work that you did on Italy, or the work that you did on Russia when they're doing their cultural studies, pointed out some of the key aspects of culture development that we've been talking about. So that idea of really providing concrete feedback is the way that we use language to build confidence and to help children to see that they are successively developing a sense of who they are and what they can contribute to the larger community. So I want to kind of open this up and talk about some issues that you might have in this conundrum of relearning how to give feedback. It does require a certain mindfulness, and it is like learning a new language. And when I do this for teachers, I call it the language of encouragement, because it is learning a new language and really thinking about what is it that child did, what is it that they actually accomplished. And a lot of times I will reference it to if you go to a dinner party and you had just a superb experience at a restaurant or at a dinner party, and you could say, this was a great dinner, Daphne. Or you could say something like, those asparagus were cooked perfect, right? So I like to think that when we're giving feedback that helps children to develop confidence, it's about them rather than about us. So I usually tell folks, try to keep the word I out of the feedback. So it's not about, I really love the way that you put the dishes in the dishwasher, or I love the way you made your bed, or it makes me really happy when you clean up your room. Those can be effective, but more effective might be something like, you remembered how to do the sharp corners that I taught you, or the dishes fit in, or the glassware was on the top and the silverware was on the bottom. Everything will come out without spots. So as specific as you can be gives them the idea that they're more successful. So one of the things that I hear from time to time are the kinds of phrases that can set children up in families. So if you have 2 or 3 siblings, we can very often get into comparing children, not consciously, but this sort of unconscious way of saying, well, your sister can do it, or your brother does it, or look at how well your brother got ready for school today. So that idea of comparison, and that just automatically sets up situations that can cause conflict, not only between the siblings, but between you and each individual child. Last year when we were talking about this, one of the parents was talking about how her child was kind of hooked on praise, and would come up a lot of times and say, so look what I did, and what do you think, and how is this? And there's no question that there are children that have temperaments that require interaction, that they're very socially connected, or they're very interpersonally connected, and they want to have feedback, and they want to be involved in a relationship, and they use those kinds of techniques to engage with us. We can't change temperament, but we can change behavior. So getting away from that and saying things like, what do you think? How was that experience for you? Tell me more about that kind of a thing. Deflects the relationship away from this to them. How was that experience for them? Did you run into trouble while you were doing that project? So that idea of thinking about how do I provide for my child's need for connection while giving them the tools to be able to articulate them what they did that was satisfactory to them. So they're not getting hooked on getting feedback from me all the time or somebody else, another adult, about how they're doing. So throw out to me some situations where you've run into problems, and we'll sort of talk about how you may have rephrased things.
Well, this is me not rephrasing, but me realizing as you're talking, oh my gosh, I do that all the time. I did it last night. I think Brielle, we're going over the alphabet. And so when she does something right, I'm like, good job. And it's about me feeling good, and then she responds to that. So thinking about what you said, instead of saying good job, I guess I could say, you did it? Right? Maybe.
Sometimes that's perfect. You did it.
You
You
did
watch
it.
a child trying to get their shoes on in the toddler room. Sometimes they'll look up. That's my cue. And I can say, you did it.
Yeah.
Or you know almost all your letters.
Oh, yeah.
Or took you a long time to learn all those letters. So you want to acknowledge the effort that children put into a task, and then open it up. Sometimes they'll say to you, yeah, I don't like this kind of work, or this was really hard, or I don't feel like I'm there yet. I mean, life is a continuous process of developing skills. So the same thing goes for us as adults. If you were just learning how to bake, for example, and some of your baked items may be better than others, when you finally got it, somebody can say, the texture of this bread is really perfect. That kind of thing. So we're pointing out the specifics. Yes?
Yeah, I love that you talked about the mindfulness, because that's all I can hear. There's no way to be attuned to the detail unless you're learning this.
Yeah.
So it does require, as a parent, to distractions are over here somewhere, and you're zeroed in, which that could be the hardest part of all.
It is the hardest part. It becomes incredibly easy, however, with practice.
Yes.
Just like any other task that requires mindfulness.
Well, so your whole day becomes,
Yeah.
and this is just one more facet of it.
It's learning a new language. It's getting rid of the phrase good work or good job. And those of you that have been here in the past know that the head that used to be here, Mike Barkley, was kind of had that sort of coaching mentality. And so I used to joke with him all the time because his pet phrase was, good job, everybody, good work, or whatever. And I used to sort of it really was like this to me. And he said, well, it's just so much effort for me to constantly I catch myself now, and I have to constantly be rethinking. Yes, you do, until it becomes internalized. Just like wiping down the shower door, whatever, new skill you're learning. I use that because my mother had us thing about always wiping down off the shower, and I used to think when I was a child, when I get to be a grown-up, this seems ridiculous, and I'm not going to do that. And now I do that. I mean, it's become a habit, So it's practice, and it is.
But I can appreciate how it just becomes another area of practice.
Another thing for you to have to do as a parent, right?
Well, no, I mean it as a gift.
Yeah.
It's calling me to step up
Right,
to that.
to think about what they're doing. When they're bringing things to you, when they're bringing their work home, or for teachers, especially when they come up to you and they're showing you their painting, or they're showing you their work, or they're showing you the paper that they've written, it's very hard to think, okay, what is it about this that really does make it good work or a good job? Did they really pay attention to the grammar, or did they really pay attention to their handwriting, or did they really do the research that was necessary? So it's kind of thinking about, what is this that made it good work or good job? Did they get it done in the amount of time that they had? You finished that on time. And then the biggest thing is stopping, not getting hooked in, because if you give them space, that's when they'll engage in the conversation with you. Do you find that to be the
I was
case with
actually
yours?
thinking in a different way, is that I'm struggling with knowing when to stop, because otherwise it just becomes like this really drawn out love fest. And it's like, you know, depending on the age, obviously 6, 8, and
Right.
almost 12 is all different.
Very different.
But the thing that we're working on the most is, and I'm probably doing it all wrong, you know, like for example, Benjamin, who's the youngest, will come up and he'll show me a drawing, or he spelled something, or his Legos, it's usually the Legos, and I'll be in the middle of like literally trying to get out the door, and so it's, the good job is like, yeah, I see you, I hear you, I know you're showing me something, but we need to go. So we're working on, I can tell you're really proud, that took a lot of time, I saw how long you were working on it, this isn't a good time for mommy to really pay attention, can we do this later? And it's much harder younger, but also with the older one, it was like, fine, you know, you're not interested. It's really, sometimes you just can't have that moment,
Yeah.
no matter how mindful you are, you
Mhm.
physically don't have the time. You have to go pick someone up, you have to take something off the stove, whatever it is, finish a phone call. And that's where we're struggling, because it feels like you're not, like you're dismissive,
Mhm.
unless you stop everything right at that moment and go, tell me more. You know, and you
Well,
can't do that.
right,
And
right.
so we're struggling with the phrasing of, I
Mhm.
see that this matters to you, I see how much you worked on it, all of those things, but we need to, you know, put a pin in it for right now.
Right. In that situation, I would leave out the I
Okay.
and say, rather than I see that you've worked on this, or I see how long you've spent on this, just something like, you spent a long time on that. Now we need to get in the car. So you're acknowledging what they've done. The hard thing for me, the general rule is that I try to do everything without that I word. Because that's the hook, that's them grabbing you in. So if you just comment on the thing, and you can flip it with something that's important, that's important, or give them that thing about, I want to talk about this when we come home. Something like that. But it is tricky when you have all these other things to do and you don't want it to seem like you're being dismissive or that it's not important to you, because that's what they'll pick up on when they, especially when they get older, or when they're young. Those two periods of development are the ones where they sort of react the most. If you're not super attentive and you're not paying attention to me, you're not engaged with me.
Yeah, which then brings up the sibling thing, because it's, you know, once the other one shows her work, you know, you're
Right.
you're listening or
Right.
whatever. It's like, yeah, but you approached me when there was
Right.
a quiet moment.
As I'm walking out the door, as opposed to around the dinner table. The other thing that can help with that is if there's reflective time within the day, and you can set that up in advance. So those times when communication of any kind breaks down, which is almost always around issues of time, you know, you have to, I mean, that's where children, the first way that they get control of the family is around getting ready. So if you establish a pattern that, like, dinner time or after school is a time when we get to process our day or talk about what we've done, when I'm getting ready to leave in the morning, that's a hard time for me. So if you revisit it after the fact and talk about that I wasn't being dismissive. My job in the morning is to get everybody into the car and to get to school and for me to get to work or whatever. So for me to be able to pay attention to what's happened, let's do that at the end of the day. Let's do that at dinner time. And that can happen even with the young ones. When I'm picking you up and you want to show me what you've done, let's talk about that in the car. That kind of thing. So you're setting them up in advance for the best time for communication. And I think you have 3 children and a spouse, right? So that's 4 other people who want feedback from you, who want to engage with you. And sometimes it's best to let each one know that they all have their separate time. That with the adults, it might be after the children are gone to bed. With each child, with one it might be if they need that feedback right at the end of the day. Others can wait till you're tucking them in, or that kind of quiet time. And I found that a phrase that I like to use with older children kind of at the end of the day is, what was special about today? What was hard about today? If they come home and they're kind of cranky, or you can tell that they're off, what was hard about today? And I, again, leave that I out of it, rather than I notice that you seem cranky. Just something about their day created that affect. So it's very easy as they get older, if you say, I notice you seem a little cranky today, or you seem a little sad, or for them to say, I'm fine, I'm fine, because they don't want to get into it. So what you actually see is that pulling away from the conversation. So perhaps just a phrase like tough day, good day, got a lot done, those kinds of things. Very short little comments, and then leave that space. And I think the car is a great place for conversations, actually, because they're sort of contained. I used to tell parents that had to tell their children tough stuff. A really great place sometimes to do it is in the car, without, well, maybe not so much now because there's so much electronic stuff happening in the car, but they're in a confined space. They kind of can't get away from you. You don't have to be making eye contact, which can be very threatening because you're driving the car, but you're in proximity. So there's this intimacy to that space. So a lot of times when you're driving home, it's a nice time to talk about how things are going. At the end of the day, there's kind of times when there's less stress about you. With your little person.
Yeah, so something that I've noticed in her that I remember vividly as a child is she's the oldest, and so we praised the 6-month-old for doing something, and she's like, well, I can do that. Why am I not getting any praise for that?
Right.
And how to, sort of give praise to the younger one while still validating what she's
Right.
doing. I think is tough.
Well, word that probably I like to focus on is that word praise, because Montessori talks about when children are meaningfully engaged with activity, they really don't need praise. What they need is this, that's I call it the language of encouragement.
Yeah.
That idea that they're approximating, getting closer and closer to success. So if you don't do it, if you eliminate those terms, good job or whatever, from your little one, and just comment on what they're doing. Oh, look, you put your bottle away, or
Yeah.
that. Or
Yeah,
she's
but
crawling, or he's crawling. You used to crawl.
Yeah, but that's what she said. She's like, well, I can crawl.
Of course. And you can comment about when you were a baby, you crawled.
Yeah.
Now you're walking, or now
Yeah.
you can get your own coat on. So a lot of times using that history,
Yeah.
especially when they're younger, to remind them of how far they've come. With the toddlers, when they start developing language skills, when they go from really not being able to dress themselves to be able to get their coats on, a lot of times I'll say, I remember when you didn't know how to put on your coat. Now you do. That's enough. I remember when you didn't know how to put your shoes on. Now you do. So the same thing. I remember when you didn't know how to walk, and now you do. So you're commenting on what your little one is doing, and also reminding your older one that you do remember that.
Yeah.
And now, she's able to do these things for herself. It's a girl. It's your girl.
Two girls, yeah.
So, again, it's that practice, which is tricky.
When you're saying that, though, I also hear a lot of the intonation in your voice. So, although eliminating the I in the relationship, but I feel like I don't know if you can clarify the feeling, intonation behind the voice. Is that a big part of it?
I think it can be, sure. They respond to enthusiasm. They respond to that idea that there's emotion, that there's an emotional experience here between you. I mean, I don't think you don't want to have it be flat. You do want to sort of give them an idea that even though I have to get in the car, we have to get going, I really want to see what you've done. I want to share this experience, whatever it is that you got all the, you know all your letters now. So that you have that connection with them. And there's no question about that your own affect and the way you use your voice. We call those social pragmatics. The way you use your tone conveys something. I mean, I joke with them all the time in the toddler room about sometimes you have to have the mother look. You do have to give them through your facial expression. Well, I call it the mother look. My mother could control my behavior with the look. And sometimes you need to, like when I'm in the toddler room and I'm noticing a toddler engaging with me as sort of a test, I need to be able to give them the, I know what you're up to, and as they're touching all the snack or something. So the social pragmatics that we use are important also to this process of communication, and those are reflective of how you do that. If you have a softer way of giving information with your body or your expressions or your voice, and it works, then and it probably does work because it's true to who you are, then I think that's important.
I wonder if, and correct me if I'm wrong, if the I is more so for us as parents, so we don't make it about ourselves. Does that make sense? Like, I see that you're
Right.
because it's easy for me to make it like,
Mhm.
yeah, I see you.
Yeah.
And she's like, yay, mommy.
Yeah.
So I take the attention off of me and put it on her. So the I see it as, it's not about you, Esther. It's about Leo right now.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And there certainly are times when it's appropriate to say, I see that.
Yeah.
When they look up and they engage with you, they just want to know that they've been seen, or I hear you. I'm not saying to completely eliminate that. It's when the situation looks like it's a hook to when the first instinct is to say good work or good job. That's when you want to say, what about this can I comment on? That gives them the idea. Because here's what happens. Sometimes we say it even when it's not good work or it's not a good job, right?
Yeah.
And boy, do they pick up on that, especially when they're older. They do a sloppy job. They didn't proofread, right? And they bring it up to you, and you're in a hurry, and you say something like, oh, good job, or you got it done. And they know they haven't. So in those situations, when you want them to kind of do self-evaluation, you can say something like, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about this paper? You spent a lot of time on this paper, how do you feel about it? So that it invites them to do that own self-evaluation. Sometimes the best thing is nothing at all. Sometimes just a can be very effective. Or or tell me more. Tell me more.
We found that the more we try to do this, which I'm always good job, good work, and then I go, and then I add to it because I catch myself doing it. So I'm just, obviously that's my fallback. But I think we have found that getting into that habit has also made it much easier when there is, for lack of a better word, a failure, or like something has not gone right. Because we're talking right now about like good job and how to praise differently. But especially the older they get, where they're disappointed, where whatever it is that they're doing doesn't go well. And since we've gotten into the habit of saying that was a lot of work you put into that as praise, it also can be helpful when things go wrong. Like you finished it. Like I don't know how to explain it, but it's kind of like it becomes this global language about effort and finishing what you start and being present versus it being like, oh, this didn't work out for you, but you finished it, you know, which is kind of like a sorry second place, versus if that's what you're saying when they're also doing a good thing, it's recognized across the board as an important, I don't know if that makes sense.
The efforts,
Yeah.
yeah. You know, well, I used to work with coaches, children's coaches around us, because boy, that's where you really hear a lot of good job and good work. And it's, that whole coaching mentality is kind of based on that rah, rah, rah kind of thing. And so, you know, when they're doing t-ball, sometimes the children don't hit the ball. They just don't hit it. So to be able to say, you really moved your shoulders, got the bat so close. So they may have missed the boat, they may have missed the ball, but they got close, is what you're commenting on. That's the comment, that you got so close. We'll keep practicing, something like that. So it was, they were the hardest to work with because it was really changing the culture of what they were seeing. They were seeing what wasn't happening as opposed to what was happening. So, you know, the fact that the child almost hit the ball is what I wanted them to know. Oh, we almost got it, because they knew that they hadn't hit the ball.
Right.
So, you know, to say you didn't hit the ball is obvious, or, you know, good job when they knew it wasn't a good job because the ball didn't go anywhere, seems kind of counterintuitive even to the little ones. So reflecting on those successive steps towards the goal, it can be what's important. And also to invite them to say, how do you feel about this work? How do you feel about it? And as when they get older, you can ask them, how do you feel about your efforts with this? You know, sometimes they can fake it as they get, especially as they get older, right?
Yeah.
They can have success, but it isn't the best success.
Yeah.
Isn't the best? It's the good, better, and best. So it's okay to, I think, to comment on that. It's sort of a joke with us Montessorians that we're constantly thinking, well, this is good. Could it be better? So I'll rearrange my classroom, right? And then, okay, this is better. Let me try it this way. Is this the best way it can be? So it's this, and then you realize that the best way was really the first way. But we have, because we're experiential, right, Ivy? We have to do it to see if it's going to work. And I think sharing that process with children, especially as they get older, letting them know that that's kind of the process, the good, better, and best thing, is important for them to hear. That this was a good effort. Is it the best effort? So as they get older, that idea of self-evaluation, and consequently, the confidence that comes with successive approximation, with getting closer to what they consider their best effort, is what's important. Because ultimately, that's what we want. We want them to be confident in their own efforts, not confident in getting feedback about how we perceive their efforts. But that it becomes an internal process.
I like that. I like being able to ask her now, like, how do you think you did? Because even when they have like a presentation night here, I do try to, I'll comment on rather than that was a great job. I will say, but I'll say I liked when you did this, and I pick out things I like. But I probably would be better to say, how do you think you did, or how did you think that went? Are you happy with?
Yeah. I mean, as adults,
we
do that. We tend to say, how do you think you did at that presentation? Or how did you think that went at your class?
Yeah.
Well, I think I was too dependent on my notes. Or I felt like I tried to cover too much. You know, that self-evaluation that we do is so important. And I like to use the word evaluation because it means to give value to. So when I'm doing staff evaluation, I say, this is a good thing. I'm going to be able to tell you what you do that's valuable, that's meaningful, not what you're necessarily doing bad. And I think that's how we think of evaluation, right? We have completely taken a really great word and created sort of a negative context for it. But you know, part of my job here is, especially with the younger children in the early childhood, is to tell these teachers, what's valuable about their practices and what makes this classroom or this idea or this activity successful for this group of children. So I think as they get older, that idea of self-evaluation is so important because it's a skill they're going to be using their whole lives. And it should be a developmental process. So they go from, toddlers, primary, lower L, upper L, constantly getting feedback about how they're doing from themselves.
And I think at that age too, kind of like to go back to what you were saying about your girls, that we're struggling with right home. I feel like I'm telling stories about my kids too. This is what we're having at home. But we say a lot that the compliment of one person is not a criticism of the other, because we have that with siblings, the whole I can crawl, I can do this, that kind of thing. But then now that we're on the older side, it happens with peer groups. That if someone gets praised, that they did a great job, or they got chosen to do something, that it can feel like a criticism of their effort. And so we try really hard, at least when we're talking about the siblings, to say just because I'm pointing out, Benjamin did this really well, I'm not saying, and you didn't. It's just this, and it's really difficult. But I think because I know that as an adult, I still struggle with that. With friends or at work, when someone will say like so and so did whatever great, or so and so looked great, whatever it is. Like, what are you trying to say? Which is the self-centered and all that. I know that, but I think it's really hard to kind of figure out how to do that.
Yeah. When I'm working with teachers, I always tell them it has to be personal. It has to be you and me. It has to be me saying to you, that color makes your eyes pop. So that when you're sitting next to her, you don't think, I didn't choose the right clothes, that kind of thing. So that's why when you have multiple children in your family, that time together really needs to be personal. So I try not to say things generally. Like one of the things that you hear in some early childhood programs, this is an example of what teachers think that they're doing to reinforce positive behavior. Look at how carefully Esther is walking on the line, or look at how carefully Jill carried her work to the table. So that just immediately sets you up, because I can't do it that carefully. I'm only 3, right? Or I can't do it
kids
that
don't
well.
like that.
No, that comparison.
To be pointed
out.
Yeah, I mean,
like too much.
because every child has their own personality and their own.
And then they know that they're being watched.
Yeah.
So the next time if they don't do it well.
Right.
It places an expectation that you need to continue to walk like that.
Yeah.
Because
Right.
I praise that.
Right,
That's
exactly.
That's the value statement.
And those of us that have siblings can probably have all kinds of memories about when our parents maybe said something positive about a brother. I mean, for me, it used to be on the phone. Like I would hear my mother say, "Oh, Don got straight A's again," and well, Nancy is very competent at research, whatever it was. But I certainly picked up that academic achievement was more important, let's say, than the social stuff or whatever. So again, that's that time when you have, and it's hard. You've got 3 of them. When you have more than one child, it can be much more difficult. You'll be finding this out. All of you that have more siblings in your family have to really negotiate that one-on-one time. So I like to, for me, a ground rule is when I'm in the classrooms, because children are always coming up to me and showing me their stuff, is to just make it really personal. They come up with a painting. You used a lot of color. So it's really about, right now, just us. And try not to get into that
So
comparison.
we're not trying to model how to be in a group and deal, because that's, with the older ones, like, they're in groups. They're in a
so I
peer
think you
group,
can
like
comment.
I'm trying to model,
well,
this is how you handle it when someone else gets praise or gets you know, a sport thing, we don't do sports, but,
Right.
you know, with sports stuff.
Well, if it's a
Yeah.
group process, then I think the feedback comes back to the group. Each one of you made a special contribution to this, and the talk went really smoothly.
Yeah, like
Something like
I
that.
completely failed.
Pardon me?
I've completely failed with like cross country because Maddie does cross country, and I love to cheer. I'm a cheerleader, but I'm always like good job, but sometimes, you know,
It's hard.
It's hard, because everybody around you is doing that,
Right.
especially
Yeah.
with sports stuff.
See,
Yeah.
I think,
so,
I
what
don't-
can I say? Other than good
I
job?
think it's after the fact.
Yeah.
I think, come on, we all, right? I go to a concert and I'm clapping. I
Yeah.
mean, we all have that general expression of appreciation or recognition of accomplishment. It's afterwards saying something like, "You got every goal,"
Yeah.
or "You blocked that goal," or whatever the position is. You know, if I know the people in the orchestra, you got spot on with that high C. You know, something like that. If that's what's necessary. I mean, not always is it necessary, but I think I don't want you to completely give up the idea that.
Yeah.
And there's a difference between cheering and praise, and I think it's like that whole thing about compliments. Compliment versus praise, which when somebody one time asked me about me, he said, well, compliment really is about your perception. It's about my perception of how you look, how you did something.
Yeah.
That's very different than the idea of just good job or good this. It means I'm noticing things. The idea of encouragement is this new language that provides real feedback about how successful or close to success or what they perceive as success. One of the things that can happen if children start getting themselves hooked on praise is, and I see this in the classrooms, is that they'll be sitting over and they'll just do a whole bunch of stuff. You know, they'll I see it with incense a lot of times. They'll just do a bunch of incense, and then they'll show you their inset and show you their inset. And so, and that happened in my class where they're just over there whipping out work. So then we said, okay, this is meaningless. They're missing the whole point of this. So clearly, somehow they've gotten the idea it's about product, not process. So we need to start using language that gets them back into process. So you matched up all the lines, or those lines are so close together it looks like one line, whatever the thing is. But that idea of checking in with yourself about, and you'll notice it because they'll start doing things just to look busy.
Yeah.
Especially as they get older, right? If I just look busy, she'll leave me alone. And I remember that. I remember from my junior high days in high school that if I could just, I wouldn't make eye contact. I'd just look like I was writing. It could be anything, so I didn't get called on.
Yeah.
You know, so if I don't make eye contact with you and I look like I'm real, I got so I could have the concentration look, you know, and I'm writing stuff down and I don't get called on. So I look busy. And the teacher could say, oh, Nancy taking notes, or, you know, good job, they're taking notes. It may have nothing to do with note taking. So I think as they get older, they get much more competent at self-evaluation, and they get much more competent at avoidance kinds of strategies or techniques to disengage kind of with the process. So yeah, the best is yet to come.
Yeah.
How about for you with your
So I have
not so little one?
He's not, and I also have two little dogs.
Yeah.
I have a freshman in college and I have a senior in high school.
Yeah.
And everything is, wow, we did a lot of things wrong. But I feel, as now down with number 3, right, one change was coming here, right, and really excited and happy that we made that switch. I'm seeing how the application of a lot of these things, it's never too late, but I see
It's
how I
never
can
too late.
slip the languages in with my daughters. And with some things, 'cause there's some challenges in our house right
think when there's challenges going on and you're working on those challenges, that's the perfect time to use. We have challenges and we're working on them. That can be enough. That can be enough. I think it's important for children to know that we're developing skills just like they are. So it's not uncommon for parents to say, oh man, I have been blowing it for 25 years, 35 years, 45 years, right? To say, I used to tell parents, what you say is I went to a workshop today, or I had a conference with Nancy, and I learned a whole new way of doing something, or a way that you do things here that we don't do it at school, at home. I didn't know that you knew how to put your clothes on, your coats on hangers until I was in your classroom. So that's what we're going to start doing here. That idea, because you're going to see things in the classrooms that usually you had no idea that your children could do, especially when they're younger. I mean, the children's development of competencies in these classrooms can sometimes kind of blow parents' minds when they come in to observe or they see what they're actually doing. I had parents that said, I had no idea that they knew how to bust their own stuff at the table. Yeah, that's sort of our expectation. So when Andy, one of our parents, said, I had no idea that Marcus could do this, I said, well, tell him that when I was observing today in the classroom, I saw that you know how to put all your dishes in the basin. So let's do that here. Let's do that here. So that they get that we're also, as adults, in the process of kind of fine-tuning our parenting skills or our teaching skills, and that we're continuing to learn new strategies and techniques. And I think that the book that you were talking about, Daphne, has a lot of that kind of thing about how you just rephrase. We were talking before we started on the book. Who's the author of that?
I think it's Kelly Corrigan. It's a book for adults. It's just like phrases she's learned how to use the older she gets, like how to say no and how to say yes. It's called Tell Me More by Kelly Corrigan. I think it's been out for a couple of years, but it's very, very funny. But it's also been really kind of like,
Never thought about that, right?
Like how to say no without apologizing.
Right.
To just say no, but have a great time. You know, I can't make it to your party, but I hope it's great. You know, without the excuses.
Right.
Exactly, and also how to say yes. And it's a bunch of different things about parenting and marriage and jobs. But like I said, it's funny too. It's
right. And I think
tongue-in-cheek, witty kind of thing.
And I think that, you know, I don't want you to think, I just said that. Good job. I did have a staff member, though, who constantly said that she'd come from another tradition and said that was a big thing. Good job. And so I used to joke with her about, Shelby, I'm going to have to, like, get a little taser or something so that there's a negative, you know, feedback whenever could you put a rubber band around your wrist or something? It was just raising the consciousness about it. And eventually you do catch yourself. And then the difficulty is you'll catch yourself, but then it's developing the kind of the vocabulary for what you do say. So when they come up to show you that they're painting or their paper or what they've done, you may in your mind think, oh, I'm not going to say good job, but what do I say?
Yeah, prepared
instead?
to know what else to say.
So it's kind of building that vocabulary.
And also when they get older, sometimes it feels like a trap, or maybe it's just my
Yes, it
But
can.
you know, I got shown a draft last night, and you know, my brain's like a mile a minute, like, okay, does she want me to comment? Does she not want me to comment? Because you know, I used to be a writing teacher, so is she asking me for feedback? Is she not? Like, you know, and so I just said, before I read this, what would you like from me? Do you want me to just read it, or
I've
do
asked
you
that
want
too.
like? Because
What do you want?
if I do the wrong thing, it can be catastrophic. And I remember that as a young person, even through college, when I'd be really proud of something, someone would read it and immediately critique. It's like, I wanted you to just enjoy it.
Right.
Or when I wanted them to give me a critique and they'd be like, great. And you're like, well, that's not helpful. You know, like, you have to tell people this is what I need from you. But it's kind of scary sometimes.
Well,
even the older ones are like,
she won't let me read anything.
oh, that's the other thing.
And then after it's been turned in, then sometimes she'll let me read it. And then it's like, do I point out anything that I see that's wrong?
Well,
Because
I think that's
I don't
I think that's spot on. I think as they get older, what you want them to do is be able to articulate what it is that they want from you.
Yeah.
So by asking them, do you want me to read this for content? Do you want me to read it for punctuation? I mean, that's what writing labs in colleges, a lot of times they have, because it is kind of appalling, I must say, how writing skills have kind of gone downhill here in the educational system. So by asking, do you want me to read this for punctuation? As they get older, I think you ask them what they want especially if they bring their work to you. Sometimes I can say, tell me what I'm looking at.
yeah.
Tell me what I'm looking at here, or what I'm looking for here. Because sometimes
But you though, when they share after the fact.
After the fact.
after the
You're
fact,
I know. So
Yeah.
then it's like, oh no.
I think something like, how are you feeling about this?
Yeah.
Or, you're sharing
But when
it.
she is really proud of something, and then it's like,
Yeah.
can't I just point out
Yeah.
a couple of things that
That phrase, tell me about this, can be very
Yeah.
effective. Sometimes the best response is kind of what I call the no response, which is the, huh, or, because they're not sure what kind of feedback they want.
Yeah.
So in kind of giving just that general,
Mine would have
In-
fit if I ever said.
it invites them to kind of share more. So it might be something like, well, what do you think about the colors I use? So if they're showing you something and you're not sure what they're showing you, as they get older, you can ask that. With younger ones, sometimes it's just, so that you're not getting hooked into just good job, good work, but you're not quite, are they showing it to you because it's an effort of using their pencils? Is it the color? What is it about this? So sometimes you could say something like, oh, you used a lot of color. That's not the color wasn't the issue with this. It was the shape that I made, that kind of thing. So then we sort of comment on what we see, but it wasn't what they wanted you to see. So at that time, sometimes it's okay to just say, or spent a lot of time. That's sometimes a phrase I'll go to a lot, especially if they have spent a lot of time doing something. Because in a Montessori class, we allow them to work kind of until the task is done. It's not, the time factor is not so much set by the adults as it is by the completion of the task. So it's not uncommon to have children sit in a primary class and spend 40 minutes polishing a little piece of silver, or watering the plants or cleaning the plants. So that might be what you're commenting on, because if they're developing more competency at staying in a task, that's the goal. That as the teacher, or the parent, that's the goal. Then you want to comment and spend a lot of time doing that. Cleaning their room. And also there's just times that you think, clearly this is not my thing. Their room is their room, and whether or not they're going to clean it or not really isn't about me. And then if they do it, that's when you want to say, spend a lot of time getting your room in order. Made it easier to find things maybe for you. That was always my thing. Or the junk drawer, those kind of things. I kind of knew where everything was in the junk drawer. It was just hard for anybody else that was sharing that space with me to figure out, what my system for organizing tape was. Like, why would you ever put the tape here? So, it is really just practice. It's really practicing. And being aware of it, I think, if nothing else, you'll be aware of when you're saying good job or good work. And that awareness of it is sort of the first step of thinking, I did it. And then coming back to, how could I have phrased this differently? And sometimes it is just good work. It's a good job, and that's fine. And then, you know, you can go back and visit it later. You can go back and visit later and talk about what specifically you noticed. And at the time when you're getting out in the morning, you can't notice all the details that were involved in making that Lego structure or whatever. So you can go back and, you know, I mean, children are very accommodating and forgiving about us revisiting, coming back and revisiting the situation or paying attention to whatever the detail was that they wanted us to notice. So
We also, I don't know if it's anybody else's thing, but we actually had a family meeting last year where it was kind of like, Mom and, you know, because we've never parented the oldest child's age before. Every time she turns an age, I've never done that
It's
before.
the first time.
You know, I've never parented a middle child before, and I've never parented a third or a boy, because I have two older girls. Like, you know, like we're saying, like all of this is, you know, each of one of you presents a learning thing for us. But we actually had like a little family meeting about, we're gonna try to talk about things differently. It wasn't just praise, it was some other stuff that was happening in the house. Certain language that was being used by the adults. And it kind of became a game. So we're not gonna be saying like, good job, or this kind of thing anymore. And I know we said it had come up in one of the meetings here. But just to have a conversation so that they heard that it was with intent and mindfulness, that we were trying to do something different. And then of course, like the youngest loved calling us out every time you say good job, you know. So, you know, so like everything, I mean, it petered out obviously because we all fall into old habits.
Right.
But we made the decision to just kind of be open about, we're trying something different because stuff is not working right now. There was a lot more yelling than there used to be. There was a lot more tears. You know, not all the children's.
Right.
Mom is crying a lot now. But it was just that kind of like, they were old enough at that point to just say, we're trying something different.
I think that's a perfect way to do it, to let them know that there's a context, especially as they get older, that there's a context about why we have to talk about this. You know, it might be a phrase. Maybe you're starting to hear too much language that you're not happy with. You know, for me, besides the good job, the other thing that's really hard for me to hear is the term "shut up." It just wasn't allowed, and so it's like it just really offends me, and so and I remember having a family meeting where we were talking about that really is kind of the rudest thing you can say to another person. It's just the rudest thing you can say, and it was just, I think the intensity of how my parents dealt with that really had an impact on me, that you know, here I am walking around, you know, 7 years later or something, still having this visceral response if I hear that phrase. And that came out of a family meeting because my brother used to say all the time, "Oh, shut up." And finally my parents just said, and I'd go in and say, "Don said shut up." And so we had this meeting about and why that was just not a phrase that we were going to use in our house. And that really had an impact on me, how rude that sounded to somebody else. So that idea of talking about things about why you have the rules in your household, or why you're trying to work on a new skill or develop a new skill, or why you're trying to eliminate something that has been the case, tattling, you know, well, she did it or he did something. If that's the thing that makes you crazy, then you could have a meeting about, you know, people do things sometimes that are not as beneficial to our family as they could be. So tattling or telling me everything that your sister, your brother, your whatever is doing wrong is not helpful. It's not helpful to them. And, you know, we try to help each other. So what you need to do is tell them. And this, of course, becomes, the communication part of it becomes easier as they get older. The application of it, however, can be increasingly difficult because they become increasingly articulate and can get into real debates and real conflict. You know, they're starting to develop their own values, and so sometimes within a family you can have this sort of conflict of of beliefs and attitudes, sometimes some conflicts of values, not too often that one, but certainly attitudes and beliefs that can be tricky because they really have these personalities now that you think, oh man, I did it all right when they were 3. When we were 3, we had this big love fest. They really listened to me and they left me, and now it's like everything I do as a parent is wrong. Everything, and they know how to push your button, and they'll get through it. I have a dear friend who's a director of a training program that I've known since she was young. I mean, now she's a grown-up and has teenagers of herself, and when I'm with her, I like to remind her of how she tortured her mother. I said, oh, KT, yeah, I think we call this instant karma. You know, like I remember when you would give your mom so much, I was like the fairy godmother. I'd show up and I was like, how come you can't be more like Nancy? And they said, it's because I wasn't the mom. So now I get to remind her of how she tortured her mother, and she has a lot more compassion for the process, but it's a lifelong, they don't tell you when you're parents. Here's the guidebook for dealing with your second child. Here's the difference between parenting girl children and boy children. And even if they had a guidebook, it wouldn't work because every one of those little people come with their own personalities and their own temperaments that may or may not be a blend with yours. And they also have learned amazing strategies of how to control situations. And I think throughout our lifetimes as human beings, we're always looking for that balance between having control and relinquishing control. And it's from birth on until I think the day we die, we are in this constant balancing act about when am I willing to relinquish control and when do I need to take control. And so it's just beginning for all of you. I mean, it's a lifelong process. So whenever you can give control or negotiate control or work out control with your children, the more that opens the relationship up to being able to negotiate and to relinquish control or accommodate different kinds of control. And sometimes there are things that are simply not negotiable. That this is, and I think when they get older, you can say this is a non-negotiable issue in this family. Because what you start hearing as they get older, and in primary as well, is that, well, she got to do it, or she has a cell phone, or he has unlimited data, or whatever the issue is, and it can be very hard to not get sucked into that. Because they'll give you the message that if you loved me, if you were the perfect mom, you would do this, and it's taking control back to the fact that you do care about them, and this is a value that you have in your family, and this is not negotiable. Maybe when you're 17, or maybe when you're 25, or whatever the issue is. As long as it's fairly consistent and you're willing to engage in dialogue, I think is the important part, especially for those of you that have children moving up. One of the ground rules that I remember is, one of the things I remember is that if ground rules in my family, if I understood the reason for them, I would accommodate them. I might try to negotiate, but I would usually accommodate them. What never worked for me is for somebody to say, because I said so, or because I'm the mom. That did not work as well. That just invited Nancy to test. So, but if it made sense, if my parents said the reason you have an 11 o'clock curfew is because your father and I want to be able to go to bed, and we can't sleep until we know that you're safe in this house. Well, that kind of made sense to me. Okay, so if I came in at 12 and didn't check in first, I just handed over the car keys. I just knew that was going to be a consequence. But I didn't want to hear I just gave over the keys, was ready to accept the fact that I was going to be grounded. But the fact that it was explained to me why that was a ground rule, and it's what we do here. We tell the children, the reason that we want you to tuck in the chairs is because when Aiden is walking across the classroom so carefully with the glass pitchers on the tray, if the chair is tucked out, he might run right into it. It's that idea of that there's a consequence. So right from the beginning, they're getting this idea here that there are these consequences for why, and the consequences are the reasons that we have sort of the ground rules. And I think that same process can happen within a family, within the context of the family. That you don't just arbitrarily think, well, this is how it's going to be. That the parents just don't sit up at night and write down a list of ground rules. That there's a reason that we make these kind of rules in a family so that the family will operate optimally. And I think that, and as they get older, you can explain that more. And that makes sense to me as that this is the optimal situation. Is it perfect? No. Does it work for you every time? Does it work for you every time? But for the family, this is the optimal time for us to do this. So I'm not sure what we're talking about next month, or if we're having a meeting next month. I take my directions from Susanna. So thank you for coming. I'm around all the time, so if you have any questions, you can always check in with me.
Thanks, Nancy.
Is today your birthday?
Today is my birthday.
Well, happy birthday.
Thank you.
Happy
birthday.
Couldn't imagine any place I'd rather be.
Aw.
You know? So yeah, I'm 72. Don't.
You should